Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
The Lib Dems have launched their Welsh manifesto and again said a second referendum on the Brexit deal was at the heart of its proposals. Leader Tim Farron has said that he'll protect Welsh Assembly powers and would invest in rail and other infrastructure projects like the Swansea Bay Tidal Lagoon. UKIP's leader Paul Nuttall has called radical Islam a cancer that he said needs to be cut out of society. On a visit to Grimsby, Mr Nuttall claimed the UK would be safer under a UKIP government and pledged to reverse police cuts, recruit more prison officers and bolster the security services. The Green Party has put bolstering schools at the centre of their election efforts with a pledge to deliver a world-class education for every child. But what about the UK's foreign policy and security in the context of today's debate? Where do they stand on those issues? I asked the party's co-leader, Caroline Lucas, if she agrees with Jeremy Corbyn, who has linked British foreign policy to the recent terror attacks.
I think, first of all, we need to be very clear that the blame for horrific attacks like the ones in Manchester lie with the terrorists and the terrorists alone. But having said that, it's clear that acts happen in a context, and it's a very complicated context, everything from issues around deprivation and isolation right through to, yes, issues around our foreign policy as well. Now, that's a difficult conversation to be had, particularly just days after the horrific attacks in Manchester. But is it right to have that conversation? Yes, I think it is. So
do you think that 20 years of wars in the Middle East in which we've been involved has increased the threat to Britain and increased the threat of radicalisation?
I think it has, but I think more important than whether I think that, I think it's interesting that people like Eliza Manning and Buller would say the same thing, that there are consequences for the kinds of interventions that we've made in the past. And I think to some extent, you know, you're paying the price for that now. And Jeremy is right to point to that.
Why isn't the Green Party doing better? I mean, the Labour leader, Jeremy Corbyn, is a very controversial figure. There's division within the Labour Party and a lot of Labour voters not wanting to vote Labour because of him. You would have thought in that context the Green Party would be doing very well, and yet you're not.
Well, also, the media is absolutely fixated on every movement that Jeremy makes, and so therefore he is getting an awful lot of airtime. If the Green Party had a fraction of that, I'd suggest that you would see us doing a lot better too, because we still struggle to get that message across. But look, in 2015, over 1 million people voted Green, even in this awful electoral system whereby many people who had cast that vote knew that it wouldn't actually translate into seats. If we had have had a fairer system, that 1 million votes would have led to maybe 24 Green MPs, so that would have changed the face of British politics.
Are you sure the problem isn't that British voters look at the Green Party and think they don't have enough talent? You know, there's Caroline Lucas and you're the face of your party and you're in Parliament, but when they look at their local parties, they think, well, these are not credible people.
I absolutely challenge that, and I would say that when Greens get elected, then people really like what they see and they vote for more of them. You've seen that in councils up and down the country. But I'm also saying we absolutely need Green MPs elected, not least because the environment, for example, has been the missing issue in this election. Where has it been? And that's at a time when we have an air pollution public health emergency, when you've got, you know, people not being able to let their kids play in the playground in some areas because they're so terrified of the levels of air pollution that is costing the economy £20 billion a year and being linked to the premature deaths of 40,000 people in this country. That is a scandal. And it is only the Green Party that is talking about that and talking about the risks of Brexit when it comes to those environmental protections.
When do you want diesel cars off the road?
We want diesel cars off the road as soon as possible, and the experts have suggested that you could do that within a matter of a few years. What you need, of course, is a paid-for scrappage system, and therefore we would look at the model of the US, where VW there has actually paid something like $14 billion in terms of recompense for the fact that they cheated the system.
So if someone's bought a brand new diesel car for £20,000 and you want that off the road in 5 years, how are you going to do that?
Well, I don't have the answer in front of me right now, but what I can tell you is that there are brains around the table who can work that out.
Is it going to cost me anything as the owner of a diesel car?
I don't think it should cost you anything. I think we should be getting the money from the manufacturers, which is exactly the point that I'm making. I also think that rather than you scrapping your beautiful new diesel car and going for a petrol car, we also need to be investing in more public transport, because we need to recognise that as the price of motoring has come down in relative terms over the last 20 years, the price of using buses and trains has gone up. Now, I fully recognise not everybody can get everywhere they need to be by public transport, but I also recognise the fact that right now we have perverse incentives whereby it can be more expensive to take public transport than it is to take your car, and that just doesn't make sense.
Caroline Lucas, thank you very much.
Thank you.